Pennhurst was built to protect society's most vulnerable. Instead, it became proof of how easily responsibility can disappear. Today, Pennhurst stands silent. Red brick buildings scatter across 1,400 acres of Pennsylvania countryside. Empty halls, tunnels connecting nothing to nowhere. But for 70 years, thousands of people lived here. Most had no choice. In 1903, Pennsylvania faced what its leaders called a crisis. More than 3,700 people with intellectual disabilities were scattered across almshouses and prisons, mixed in with criminals and the mentally ill. The state's solution wasn't inclusion, it was separation. They built the Eastern Pennsylvania Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic, a place designed specifically to remove people with disabilities from everyday life. This wasn't considered cruel, it was considered modern, progressive even. The belief was that these individuals threatened the social order, that they needed permanent humane containment in a world apart. Large institutions promised something the old system couldn't: order, medical oversight, education under one roof, a rational, scientific solution. Pennhurst was designed for 500 people with explicit instructions to plan for expansion, because the assumption was clear, the need would only grow. Pennhurst was not built as a failure, it was built as a solution. The design reflected exactly what it was meant to accomplish. 1,400 acres in rural Chester County, far from any town. Isolation wasn't an accident, it was the point. Small red brick cottages connected by tunnels so staff could move residents between buildings without ever stepping outside. Their world was meant to be controlled, entirely internal. Inside, the design prioritized efficiency over individuality. Large day rooms, dormitory sleeping, metal mirrors bolted to walls, shared bathrooms. Privacy was not part of the plan. As demand increased, the campus expanded, not because anyone reconsidered the model, but because the buildings filled up. By 1912, just 4 years after opening, 2,800 people lived where 500 were planned. By mid-century, more than 3,500 people were housed there, nearly 7 times its original capacity. And staffing never kept pace. One account from the 1970s describes a ward with about 1,000 residents, 2 staff members on duty per shift, just 2. With so few people responsible for so many, care became triage, feeding, toileting, moving residents from bed to day room and back. That was the day. Residents spent most waking hours in chaotic day rooms, children's toys on the floor, a television playing constantly. For adults in their 30s and 40s, the message was clear. You are a child. You will always be a child. People were identified by categories, not names. Imbecile, epileptic, ward numbers. Staff referred to them as my girls or the MRs. One observer who spent 48 hours on a ward described feeling isolated and dehumanized, and she knew she could leave. She watched residents pace, rock, withdraw into themselves. Survival responses to sensory overload and the absence of anything meaningful to do. She wrote that the high point of one day was when a resident smeared feces, not because it was pleasant, but because that person received one-on-one attention during cleanup. Otherwise, there were enormous amounts of time when nothing is done. Restraints were used not because someone was dangerous, but because there weren't enough staff. Seclusion rooms existed as tools of convenience. Psychotropic drugs became chemical restraints. The system didn't require malice, it required indifference. And indifference, spread across decades, became its own form of harm. People lost skills they arrived with, not because of their disabilities, but because the environment offered nothing to maintain them. The state kept admitting people, immigrants, orphans, anyone with behavioral issues. Pennhurst became the default answer, a dumping ground disguised as a solution. Budget decisions made conditions unfixable. Pennsylvania allocated funds for buildings, but not for staff, for beds, but not for nurses. Reports were written, warnings issued, recommendations filed away, because reform would have required something no one wanted to do: admit the model itself was broken. In 1968, Philadelphia reporter Bill Baldini aired a 5-part series showing half-dressed children wandering hallways, overcrowded wards, residents with nothing to do. The footage made the reality undeniable. Real change came through the legal system. In 1974, a federal lawsuit was filed on behalf of residents. The trial lasted 32 days. More than 80 witnesses testified about gross understaffing, overuse of restraints, unsanitary conditions, physical danger. In 1977, federal judge Raymond Broderick ruled that conditions violated constitutional rights, that Pennhurst was not just ineffective, but actively harmful, that the only way to protect residents was to close it and move everyone into community-based settings. The ruling became a national precedent. It established that people with disabilities have a constitutional right to live in the least restrictive environment possible. This wasn't justice in the sense of making things right. The harm had already been done, but it was accountability. Pennhurst closed in 1987 after a 9-year transition. Nearly 1,200 people were moved into small group homes across Pennsylvania. 3 people per home, 24-hour staffing, integrated into neighborhoods. Studies followed these individuals for years. The findings were clear. On average, people were better off. More privacy, more choice, more contact with family, more opportunities to participate in life. The environment stopped making things worse. Nationally, Pennhurst's closure proved that large institutions weren't necessary. The case inspired similar reforms across the country and strengthened the foundation for disability rights. But closing the building didn't solve the deeper problem. The tendency to hide and devalue people with disabilities didn't end. It just became less visible. Group homes can replicate the same isolation if underfunded. Budget cuts still happen. Oversight still fails. Parts of the campus were repurposed. The upper section became a veterans' home. The lower campus now operates as a seasonal haunted attraction, a use that remains controversial among survivors and advocates. Preservation groups push for a museum, a memorial. In 2010, Pennhurst was recognized as an international site of conscience. The tension between remembering and moving on remains unresolved. Pennhurst still stands. Empty halls, quiet grounds. The bricks didn't create the harm. The building was just a reflection of the beliefs and priorities of the people who built it and the society that allowed it to operate. For 70 years, thousands of people lived inside those walls because society decided it was easier to hide them than to include them. Pennhurst didn't fail because it existed. It failed because it was allowed to operate for decades without accountability, because warnings were ignored, because the people inside had no power to demand better. The question Pennhurst leaves us is not about the past. Where do we still choose convenience over dignity? Where do we still hide responsibility behind systems that look humane but function as warehouses? The walls are silent now, but the questions remain.